Grace pointing Daniel, you left my birthday dinner for her? It wasn't that serious. It was just one night. One night? That was my loyalty you betrayed. Mistress laughed loud. Ooh, old woman, his now mine. He told me you two were already done. Talking angrily. Done? I'm still wearing my ring, are you? Daniel, stop turning this into drama. Grace, you turned love into betrayal. Silence tension. Truth exposed. When excuses run out, reality speaks. Grab your popcorn. Sit back and watch the confrontation unfold. And if I haven't subscribed, like, share, comment, and subscribe for more hot emotional drama like this. Get out! Grace's voice cracked like thunder in the living room. Just get out of my sight, Daniel. The front door slammed open, rain rushing in with him. Daniel stood there, shirt slightly unbuttoned, expensive cologne clinging to him like guilt. He looked annoyed, not apologetic. Grace stared at him, her birthday cake still lit on the dining table behind her. The candles had burned so low that wax had spilled onto the icing. It was 11:47 p.m. Her birthday was almost over. You're dramatic, Daniel said flatly, dropping his car keys on the table. It's just nothing special. The words hit harder than a slap. Grace blinked slowly. Nothing special? He sighed, walking past her. You're a grown woman, Grace. It's just a birthday. Why are you acting like I missed a funeral? She laughed, but it was broken. You missed your wife's birthday dinner. You missed the party. You missed the calls. You missed everything. I was busy. Busy. Her voice rose. Busy with who? Daniel stopped walking. The silence was loud. Grace's hands trembled. Answer me. He turned slowly. Why are you interrogating me? Because you left this house at 4 p.m. saying you had a meeting, she snapped. Your secretary told me there was no meeting. Daniel's jaw tightened. So now you're calling my office to spy on me? I was calling my husband, she cried. He chuckled coldly. You're exhausting. The candles finally died out behind her. Grace swallowed. Were you with her? Daniel didn't answer immediately, and that was answer enough. Her chest tightened. Were you with her? He rolled his eyes. Yes, the word echoed. Grace staggered back like someone had shoved her. Yes? She whispered. Yes, Daniel repeated calmly. I was with her. And before you start crying, I needed peace. You've been nagging for weeks. Nagging? Tears streamed down her face now. Asking my husband to come home? Asking my husband to respect me? That's nagging? You're too emotional. She stared at him in disbelief. You missed my birthday for your mistress. It wasn't planned, he said dismissively. Things just happened. Grace's stomach twisted. Things just happened? He shrugged. You wouldn't understand. Her breathing became shallow. Say her name. Daniel looked irritated. Don't start. Say her name. Vanessa, he snapped. Her name is Vanessa. Happy now? Grace nodded slowly. Vanessa, she repeated softly, like testing poison on her tongue. There was a long silence. Then she smiled. It wasn't the smile of a broken woman. It was the smile of someone who had just made a decision. Daniel frowned slightly. Why are you smiling? She wiped her tears. You're right. He blinked. What? You're right, she said calmly. It's nothing special. Daniel relaxed slightly. Finally, some maturity. Grace walked past him toward the dining table. She picked up the knife beside the untouched cake. Daniel stiffened. What are you doing? She cut a perfect slice, placed it on a plate, walked back toward him. Eat, she said. I'm not in the mood for cake. Eat, she repeated softly. He hesitated but took a bite. How does it taste? She asked. Fine. She nodded. Good. I baked it myself. I know. No, she said quietly. You don't know. He frowned. What does that mean? Grace leaned closer, her voice now barely above a whisper. It means while you were with Vanessa, I was at the hospital. Daniel froze. The hospital? He repeated. Yes. She smiled faintly. I fainted this morning. His expression shifted slightly. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. You were in a hurry. What did the doctor say? Grace held his gaze. I was pregnant. Silence swallowed the room. Daniel's lips parted. I was, she repeated, a long, suffocating pause. And, he finally asked. She swallowed. And I'm not anymore. The plate slipped from his hand and shattered. What do you mean? His voice was hoarse. I mean, she said steadily, stress can do terrible things to a body. His face went pale. You lost the baby? She nodded once. The rain outside grew heavier. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Grace? I was alone, she continued. On my birthday, in a hospital, bleeding, while my husband was with another woman. Stop, he muttered. She stepped closer. Do you know what the doctor asked me? He said nothing. She asked if my husband was on his way. Her voice broke, but her eyes stayed strong. And I said no. Daniel looked shaken now. Grace, I didn't know. You didn't want to know. He tried to reach for her hand. She stepped back. No, she said calmly. Something had changed in her, something cold. Grace, we can fix this, Daniel said quickly. We'll try again. I'll end things with Vanessa. She laughed softly. You think this is about Vanessa? He stared at her, confused. This is about respect, she said. This is about love. This is about the fact that I almost died today, and my husband called me dramatic. His face crumbled slightly. She walked toward the staircase. Where are you going? He asked. To sleep. Grace, we need to talk. She stopped at the first step, and without turning around, she said quietly, No, you need to think. Then she walked upstairs. Daniel stood alone in the living room, the broken plate at his feet, the burnt candles on the table, the weight of what he had done finally settling in. Upstairs, Grace closed the bedroom door, locked it, and finally allowed herself to collapse. But as she lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, tears drying on her cheeks, her grief slowly turned into something else. Not weakness, not despair, but resolve. Daniel thought she was dramatic. Daniel thought it was nothing special. He had no idea. Grace was about to become the most powerful version of herself, and when she was done, he would understand exactly how special she truly was. The silence began the next morning. No screaming, no crying, no confrontation, just silence. Daniel stood at the bedroom door, knocking gently. Grace, open the door. No response. He tried again. Please. The lock clicked. She opened the door and walked past him without a word. Her face was calm, too calm. Daniel followed her downstairs. Grace, we need to talk about last night. She poured herself a glass of water. There's nothing to talk about. Yes, there is. She looked at him directly for the first time that morning. Her eyes were different. You missed my birthday for your mistress. I lost our child alone. You called me dramatic. She took a slow sip of water. The summary is clear. Daniel swallowed. I said I was sorry. You said I was exhausting. He exhaled in frustration. Grace, I was angry, and I was bleeding. The words sliced through him. He ran a hand over his face. What do you want me to do? Grace set the glass down carefully. Nothing. What do you mean, nothing? I mean, she said calmly, do whatever you want. Clearly, you already do. She picked up her handbag. Where are you going? Daniel asked. To the office. He frowned. You haven't gone in weeks. I know, and that unsettled him more than her tears ever could. The woman Daniel underestimated. Grace walked into the corporate building with quiet authority. Employees who hadn't seen her in weeks stood straighter. Because Grace was not just Daniel's wife, she was the co-founder of the company. The silent architect behind the brand Daniel loved to boast about. While Daniel handled public relations and flashy deals, Grace handled structure, numbers, investments. She built the foundation. And foundations, when shaken, bring buildings down. Her heels clicked across the marble floor. Good morning, Ma, her assistant Ifunanya said cautiously. Schedule a board meeting, Grace replied calmly. End of week. Ifunanya blinked. A board meeting? Yes. Grace entered her office and shut the door. Then she opened her laptop and began to dig. Vanessa. It didn't take long. Hotel bookings charged to the company card. Client entertainment. Private flight tickets. Luxury gifts. Daniel wasn't even careful. Grace stared at the transaction history. Her fingers didn't shake. Her tears were gone. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Chike, she said softly when the line connected. Ah, Grace, it's been a while. Chike was a corporate lawyer, and more importantly, he owed her a favor. I need you to review the company structure, she said. Quietly. There was a pause. Is everything all right? No, Grace replied calmly, but it will be. Daniel makes a choice that evening. Daniel sat across from Vanessa in an expensive restaurant. Vanessa laughed, touching his arm lightly. You look distracted. He forced a smile. Work. Or your wife? She teased. Daniel's jaw tightened. Don't start. Vanessa leaned back. I told you she'd overreact. She lost the baby, he said suddenly. Vanessa froze. What? She was pregnant. Vanessa's face changed, but not with sympathy. With you? She asked carefully. Daniel looked at her sharply. Of course with me. She sipped her wine slowly. That complicates things. Daniel stared at her. Complicates what? You said you were planning to leave her. He hesitated. Vanessa noticed. You were planning to leave her, right? He rubbed his temples. It's not that simple. She laughed softly. It never is for married men. Don't do that. Do what? She snapped lightly. State facts? Daniel leaned forward. I care about you. Vanessa's eyes hardened. Care isn't commitment. The air between them shifted. You said she was cold, weak, dependent on you. Daniel said nothing. Vanessa smirked slightly. Is she? He thought about the way Grace looked at him that morning. Calm, unshaken. No, he admitted quietly. The boardroom Friday arrived. Daniel walked into the boardroom confidently until he saw Grace at the head of the table. Not beside him, at the head. Board members sat quietly. Chaike was present too. Daniel frowned. What's going on? Grace smiled politely. Sit down, Daniel. Her voice was steady, professional, dangerous. He sat. Grace slid a file across the table. What is this? He asked. Financial records, she replied. Company funds used for personal affairs. His stomach dropped. You're embarrassing me in front of the board? He hissed. She tilted her head slightly. No, you embarrassed yourself. One board member cleared his throat. Daniel, these transactions are serious. Daniel looked around the room. This is between my wife and I. Grace's eyes sharpened. No, she said quietly. It's between a CEO and his shareholders. Chike spoke next. As co-founder and majority shareholder, Grace has the authority to call for a vote regarding executive misconduct. Daniel's face drained of color. Majority? He repeated. Grace folded her hands calmly. Yes, she said. Majority. His voice lowered. What did you do? She held his gaze. I protected what I built. The vote was called. One by one, hands were raised. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. When the final vote was counted, it was unanimous. Effective immediately, Daniel was suspended as CEO pending investigation. This is insane, he shouted, standing abruptly. Grace didn't flinch. You're dramatic, she said softly, the same words, thrown back at him. His breathing became uneven. You can't do this. I just did. The realization that night, Daniel returned home furious. Grace was sitting in the living room, calmly reading. You ruined me, he shouted. She turned a page slowly. No, you ruined yourself. You planned this. No, she corrected gently. I endured. Then I acted. He paced. You're my wife. She closed the book. And you were my husband. The words landed heavily. He stopped moving. Grace stood. You thought I was weak because I loved you, she continued quietly. You thought my silence was dependence. She stepped closer. But pain, she said, her voice lowering, is an excellent teacher. Daniel's anger slowly turned into fear. What do you want? He asked. Grace looked at him long and hard. Then she smiled slightly. I want you to feel exactly what I felt. A knock came at the door. Daniel frowned. Who is that? Grace walked past him, opened the door. Vanessa stood there, confused. Grace? Vanessa blinked. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Grace stepped aside politely. Come in, she said calmly. We should all talk. Daniel looked between them in panic. Grace, what are you doing? She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. You said it was nothing special. Her eyes darkened. Let's see how special it feels when everything you love disappears. Vanessa stepped inside slowly. The air in the living room felt thick, suffocating. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Grace, this is unnecessary. Grace closed the door gently. No, she said calmly. This is clarity. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. She was dressed elegantly, fitted black dress, flawless makeup, expensive perfume. She looked like a woman used to being chosen. But tonight she wasn't the center of power. Grace was. Vanessa looked between them. Daniel, what's going on? Daniel forced a laugh. Nothing. She's just being dramatic. Grace smiled faintly at that word. Please, she said, gesturing toward the couch. Sit. Vanessa hesitated but obeyed. Daniel remained standing. Grace stayed on her feet too. A quiet triangle of tension. The truth unfolds. Grace walked to the bar stand and poured 3 glasses of water. She handed one to Vanessa first, then Daniel, then kept one for herself. I prefer wine, Vanessa said lightly, trying to break the tension. Grace's eyes met hers. I prefer loyalty, she replied. Silence. Vanessa cleared her throat. Look, I don't want trouble. Daniel told me you both were practically separated. Grace slowly turned toward Daniel. Separated? She repeated softly. Daniel stiffened. Grace, is that what you told her? Vanessa's confidence wavered. He said the marriage was dead. Grace nodded slowly, absorbing the lie like evidence. The marriage was not dead, Grace said calmly. It was wounded. There's a difference. She faced Vanessa fully now. Did he tell you I was pregnant? Vanessa froze. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. No, Vanessa whispered. Grace watched Daniel carefully. Did he tell you, Grace continued, her voice steady, that while he was in your bed, I was in a hospital losing our child? Vanessa's face drained of color. You said she was fine. Vanessa snapped at Daniel. You said she exaggerates everything. Grace let out a soft breath. There it is, she murmured. Daniel's temper flared. Why are we doing this? What do you want, Grace? A confession? Fine. I cheated. I made mistakes. Mistakes? Grace's voice sharpened slightly. For 8 months? Vanessa's head snapped toward him. 8 months? Daniel said nothing. Vanessa stood abruptly. You told me it was 3. The lies were unraveling. Grace didn't need to raise her voice. They were destroying each other for her. Vanessa learns her place. Vanessa grabbed her handbag. You're unbelievable. Daniel stepped forward. Vanessa, wait. She pulled away from him. Did you ever plan to leave her? He hesitated again. That hesitation was louder than any answer. Vanessa laughed bitterly. I was just convenient, wasn't I? Grace spoke softly, almost gently. You were a distraction. Vanessa looked at her sharply. Grace continued, he didn't choose you. He escaped into you. The truth burned. Vanessa turned to Daniel one last time. You deserve each other. Then she walked out. The door closed, and for the first time since the affair began, Daniel stood alone without either woman beside him, the hidden power. He turned slowly to Grace. Are you satisfied now? She studied him. No. Daniel's voice dropped. What more do you want from me? Grace walked toward the staircase, then stopped midway. Without looking at him, she said, I filed for divorce this morning. The words didn't register at first. You what? She turned. And I froze your personal accounts. His face went pale. You can't do that. I can, she replied evenly. You signed a prenuptial agreement you barely read. Daniel's breathing quickened. That prenup was symbolic. Grace's lips curved slightly. No, she said, it was strategic. Years ago, Daniel remembered the day they signed it. He had been arrogant, confident. Grace had insisted on certain clauses, whilst protection of intellectual property, majority share retention in case of infidelity, financial penalties for misuse of company funds. At the time, he had laughed. You don't trust me, he had asked playfully. She had smiled back. I trust human nature. Now he understood. She had never been naive. She had been prepared. The breaking point. You planned this, Daniel whispered. Grace shook her head. No, I prepared for it. He stepped closer. You're destroying our marriage. She looked at him long and hard. You destroyed it the night you decided I was replaceable. Her voice cracked for the first time, not with weakness, but with pain. I begged you for attention, for time, for respect. Daniel swallowed. You called me dramatic. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her posture remained strong. Do you know what it feels like, she continued quietly, to lose a child and realize the father was somewhere else, laughing? Daniel's composure shattered. I didn't know, he said hoarsely. You didn't care to know. The consequence. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Grace nodded toward it. Answer. He glanced at the screen. His face changed instantly. What? She asked calmly. He answered the call. Yes. His expression darkened with every word. No, that's impossible. Effective immediately? Silence. Then, I understand. He hung up slowly. Grace didn't need to ask, but she did anyway. What happened? He looked at her like a man watching his empire burn. The board made it public. She nodded. The investigation? He swallowed. They found more. Her eyes remained steady. How much? Enough, he whispered. The company accounts weren't the only thing he had misused. There were offshore transfers, unapproved bonuses, risky investments, all uncovered once Grace initiated the audit. You handed them the knife, she said quietly. All I did was point. The collapse. Daniel sank onto the couch. His career was crumbling. His reputation was unraveling. Vanessa was gone. The media would soon know. And the woman he underestimated stood before him untouched. How long? He asked weakly. How long what? How long have you been planning to leave? Grace's face softened just slightly. I wasn't planning to leave, she said honestly. I was planning to stay. He looked up at her. I loved you, she whispered. That hurt more than her anger. But love without respect, she added, is slow suicide. The final blow. She walked toward the door. I'll be staying at the penthouse for now. You're leaving tonight? His voice cracked. Yes, Grace. Please. She paused. For a split second, the old Grace, the woman who once adored him, flickered in her eyes. But then she remembered the hospital, the empty chair beside her bed, the unanswered calls, and the word dramatic. No, she said softly. Then she opened the door and walked out. Alone. Daniel remained in the silent house. The rain began again outside. He looked around the living room, her framed photos, her carefully chosen furniture, her presence in every corner. He finally understood something terrifying. Grace hadn't just been his wife. She had been his stability, his shield, his silent partner in success. And now she was his consequence. Meanwhile, Grace stood on the balcony of the penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights. Wind brushed against her face. Her phone buzzed. A message from Chike. The evidence is stronger than we thought. He may face criminal charges. Grace closed her eyes. This wasn't how she imagined her marriage ending, but she had learned something painful. Mercy without boundaries invites destruction. She opened her eyes slowly and whispered into the night, "You said it was nothing special." Her voice was no longer trembling. "You were wrong." The scandal broke at 6:12 a.m. Daniel didn't wake up to sunlight. He woke up to vibration. His phone trembled endlessly on the bedside table. Notifications, calls, messages. He groaned, turning over. Then he saw the headlines. Tech CEO under investigation for financial misconduct. Daniel Okafor suspended amid infidelity and fraud allegations. Wife and co-founder initiates internal audit. His blood ran cold. He sat upright instantly. No. His phone rang again. It was his mother. He hesitated before answering. "Daniel," her voice burst through the speaker. "What is this I'm seeing on television?" "Mom, calm down. Is it true? Did you steal from your own company?" He clenched his jaw. "It's being handled. And your wife? They are saying she exposed you." He closed his eyes tightly. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" she repeated sharply. "You disgraced your family over some woman?" The words stung more than he expected. He ended the call. His breathing grew heavier. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had control. He always had control. But control had slipped through his fingers the moment he underestimated Grace. The media storm. By noon, reporters were outside the company headquarters. By evening, social media had turned ruthless. Clips of Daniel at award ceremonies were replayed with mocking captions. Comment sections were brutal. Another powerful man who thought he was untouchable. His wife built the company. He chose a mistress over his family. Daniel threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. He paced like a trapped animal. Grace wouldn't dare go further. Would she? Meanwhile, the penthouse. Grace stood in silence, watching the same headlines on the television. She didn't smile. There was no joy in it, only closure. Her assistant, Ifunanya, stood nearby. "Ma, are you okay?" Grace nodded slowly. "Cancel all non-essential meetings." "Yes, and prepare a statement." Ifunanya blinked. "A statement?" Grace inhaled deeply. "Yes." The public statement by 5 p.m., Grace stood behind a podium in front of flashing cameras. She wore white, not black. White, calm, controlled, composed. Reporters shouted questions over each other. "Mrs. Okafor, did you expose your husband deliberately? Is the infidelity true? Are you divorcing him?" Grace raised her hand gently. Silence fell gradually. "I will not speak about my marriage publicly," she began calmly. Daniel watched the live broadcast from his living room. "But I will speak about integrity," she continued. Her voice was steady. "As co-founder of this company, I have a responsibility to protect our employees, shareholders, and partners." Cameras flashed. "Misuse of funds and breach of fiduciary duty will always be addressed, regardless of who commits it." Daniel's stomach twisted. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't bitter. She was dignified, and that made him look even worse. Grace concluded, "This company will not fall because of personal failures. It will grow stronger." She stepped away from the podium, and just like that, she became the hero of the narrative, the betrayal within. That night, Daniel received a message from someone unexpected. "We need to talk." Daniel frowned. Amika had been his closest ally in the company. They had bent rules together, shifted funds together, covered risks together. Daniel called him immediately. "What is it?" Emeka's voice was tense. "They're questioning me." "About what?" "Everything." Daniel's heart pounded. "You won't say anything." There was silence. Then Emeka exhaled slowly. "I have a family, Daniel." The words landed heavily. "You're not serious," Daniel said coldly. "They're offering immunity." Daniel felt the final piece of his empire crack. "You owe me," he growled. "I owe my children stability more." The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone. Not only had he lost Grace, he was losing loyalty, power, protection, everything. Grace's silent battle. While Daniel's world burned publicly, Grace was fighting privately. That evening, she sat in a sterile hospital office. The same building. Dr. Adebayo sat across from her. I wanted to discuss your test results, the doctor said gently. Grace's hands rested calmly on her lap. Be honest, the doctor nodded. The miscarriage caused complications. Grace held her breath. There is significant scarring. Silence. We can try treatment, the doctor continued carefully, but natural conception may be difficult. Difficult, not impossible, but not certain. Grace's throat tightened. She had already lost one child. Now she might lose the chance forever. She blinked slowly, refusing to let tears fall. Thank you, she said softly. She walked out of the hospital alone. Again, but this time, there were no candles waiting, no husband to disappoint her, no expectations, only reality. Daniel's desperation. Daniel showed up at the penthouse unannounced. He looked exhausted, unshaven, defeated. Grace opened the door slowly. What are you doing here? I need to talk. You always did, she replied quietly. You just chose not to. He stepped inside. I'm being investigated criminally. She said nothing, but Emeka is cooperating. Still nothing. They could charge me. Grace's eyes softened for a brief moment. Despite everything, she once loved this man deeply. What do you want me to do? She asked gently. Call off the audit. I can't. You can. I won't. He stared at her in disbelief. You would let me go to prison? She looked at him steadily. You let me bleed alone. The words sucked the air from the room. He staggered back slightly. Don't end us like this. She looked up at him. We ended the night you decided I was disposable. The twist. He noticed something in her expression. Fatigue. A hidden sadness. What happened? He asked quietly. She hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. The doctor says it may be difficult for me to have children again. The words struck him like lightning. He stared at her. Because of the miscarriage? She nodded once. Guilt consumed his face. Grace. I wanted to give you a family, she whispered. I wanted to build everything with you. Her composure finally cracked slightly. But you were busy building something else. Daniel dropped to his knees. The powerful CEO, on his knees, crying. I'm sorry, he choked. She watched him silently. This was the moment she once dreamed of, him realizing her worth, but realization after destruction felt empty. The dark turn. A week later, the charges were filed. Fraud, financial misconduct. Daniel was arrested quietly to avoid spectacle. But someone leaked it. Photos spread online. Handcuffs, lowered head, disgraced. Grace saw the images in silence. Her heart didn't celebrate. It simply accepted. That night, she stood alone again on the balcony, wind brushing her face. She whispered into the darkness, I didn't want revenge. She closed her eyes. I wanted love. Behind her, her phone buzzed. A new message from Chike. The board wants you as permanent CEO. Grace looked at the city lights below. Her pain had forged something stronger, something colder, something unbreakable. And for the first time, she realized something terrifying. She had survived him, and she was powerful without him. The prison gate closed with a sound Daniel would never forget. Metal against metal. Final. He stood still for a moment as the guard motioned him forward. Move. The word echoed. Daniel Okafor, once a celebrated CEO, keynote speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, now wore a plain uniform with a number stitched to his chest. Inmates whispered as he passed. Some recognized him, some didn't. But none cared about who he used to be. Power meant nothing in a place where everyone had already fallen. The first night, Daniel lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. The mattress was thin. The air was heavy. There were no silk sheets, no glass walls overlooking city lights, just concrete and consequence. Across from him, his cellmate chuckled. You're the rich guy, right? Daniel said nothing. Lost everything over a woman? Daniel turned slowly. I lost everything because I was stupid. The man laughed again. Same thing. Daniel closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. All he saw was Grace in white at that podium. Grace in the hospital bed. Grace holding that cake knife. Grace saying, you let me bleed alone. And for the first time in his life, he felt small. Grace ascends. While Daniel adjusted to confinement, Grace stepped into the boardroom again, this time permanently. The atmosphere was different, respectful, measured. She wore navy blue, strong, commanding. Chike sat beside her. The chairman cleared his throat. Congratulations, Mrs. Okafor. The board has unanimously voted to appoint you CEO. There was applause. Grace accepted it with a small nod. Thank you, she said calmly, but this is not a victory. They listened carefully. It is a correction. Her tone was firm. We will rebuild this company transparently. No shortcuts, no ego-driven decisions. Her eyes swept the room, and no one is above accountability. There was no doubt anymore. She was the leader, not by marriage, but by merit. The unexpected visitor. A week later, Grace received a request she didn't expect. Daniel wanted to see her. She stared at the message for a long time. Chike frowned. You don't owe him anything. Grace exhaled slowly. No, but I owe myself closure. The prison visit. The room smelled sterile, cold, unforgiving. Daniel walked in escorted by a guard. He looked thinner, palms rougher, eyes darker. When he saw her, he stopped. Grace sat composed, dressed simply. No anger, no softness, just strength. They sat across from each other for a moment. Neither spoke. You look different, Daniel said quietly. I am, he nodded slowly. I'm sorry isn't enough. No, she agreed. He swallowed. I replay everything every night. She said nothing. I keep thinking about that hospital room. Her jaw tightened slightly. I would give anything to go back. Grace finally spoke. But you can't. Silence settled again. I loved you? Daniel whispered. I know, she replied. He looked surprised. You loved me the only way you knew how, she continued, possessively, carelessly. Tears gathered in his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, he nodded. They sat in painful honesty. I heard about the complications, he said softly. Grace stiffened slightly. You shouldn't have. Mom told me. She looked down briefly. I'm sorry, he whispered again. Her voice was calm when she responded. I've stopped asking why. He looked confused. Why? Because sometimes, she said, tragedy is just tragedy. It doesn't need betrayal to exist. The guard signaled that time was almost up. Daniel leaned forward. Do you hate me? Grace thought about it, really thought about it. No, she said finally. That hurt him more than hatred. Why? Because hate ties me to you, she replied, and I'm learning to be free. The guard stepped closer. Daniel's voice cracked. Was I ever enough? Grace held his gaze one last time. You were, she said softly, until you chose not to be. And then she stood and walked away. The final blow. That evening, Grace returned home to the penthouse. The city lights flickered beneath her balcony again. But this time, Tsunaiheim. She didn't feel emptiness. She felt transformation. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. She hesitated before opening it. It was regarding further fertility treatment options, advanced procedures, hope. But uncertain. She placed the phone down gently. For the first time since everything happened, she allowed herself to cry, not for Daniel, not for revenge, but for the child she never got to hold, the life that could have been. Her tears fell freely, but when they stopped, her spine straightened again. Pain had broken her once, it would not break her twice. The twist of fate. 2 months later, Daniel's sentencing date arrived. The courtroom was silent. Grace did not attend. But she watched the news privately. 5 years, the judge declared. Daniel lowered his head, not in anger, not in shock, but in acceptance. He didn't look for Grace in the crowd, because he knew she had already walked away. Redemption or ruin. Weeks passed. Grace focused on rebuilding. Investors returned, stocks stabilized, employees trusted her. She created a foundation in honor of child health and maternal care. She named it quietly, the Special Project, a reminder that nothing is ever just nothing. One evening, as she prepared to leave the office, Ifunanya rushed in. Ma, there's someone here to see you. Grace frowned. I'm done for today. He says it's urgent. Who? Ifunanya hesitated. Vanessa. Grace went still. After everything, Vanessa. Send her in. Vanessa entered slowly. She looked different, less polished, less confident, more human. I won't waste your time, Vanessa began quietly. I'm leaving the country. Grace said nothing. I didn't know he was that deep into corruption. Grace nodded slightly. That doesn't excuse me, Vanessa continued. But I need you to know something. Grace's eyes sharpened. What? Vanessa swallowed. The night he missed your birthday, he tried to leave me. Grace's breath paused. He said he needed to fix things with you. The room felt suddenly smaller. He left my apartment that evening, Vanessa said softly. He looked conflicted. Grace's heart pounded slowly. He made a choice, Vanessa added, but it wasn't as simple as you think. Grace looked away toward the window. For months, she had seen Daniel as only one thing, a villain. But humans are rarely that simple. Vanessa turned to leave. Goodbye, Grace. Grace didn't stop her, but her mind was racing. Had Daniel truly been about to choose her? Did it matter? The answer came quickly. No, because choice delayed is still choice made. The calm before the end that night, Grace stood once again on her balcony, wind in her hair, city glowing beneath her. Her journey had been betrayal, tragedy, loss, revenge, justice. And now, peace was slowly arriving, but peace always comes at a cost. She closed her eyes and whispered, "This ends soon." The rain returned the night, everything finally ended. Not a storm, not violent, just steady, gentle, like the world was washing something away. Grace stood in the nursery she had designed months ago. It was never finished. Soft beige walls, an unopened crib still in its box, tiny socks folded inside a drawer. She ran her fingers over the crib's smooth wood. "This was supposed to be your room," she whispered into the quiet. For the first time since the miscarriage, she allowed herself to stand inside the dream fully, without anger shielding her, without revenge distracting her, just grief, raw, honest, and complete. Her phone vibrated softly in her hand, a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. It was from Daniel. The letter: "Grace, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to. Prison strips a man down to truth. There's no applause here, no assistance, no ego, just reflection. I replay that night over and over. Your birthday. The hospital. The word dramatic. I didn't understand what I had until I destroyed it. Vanessa told you I was leaving her that night. It's true, but I was late. And sometimes being late is the same as not coming at all. I am not writing to ask you to wait or forgive me. I'm writing to say you were never nothing special. You were everything." Daniel Grace stared at the words for a long time. Tears gathered, not from pain this time, but from closure. He finally understood. And strangely, that was enough. She didn't reply. Some endings don't require conversation, a different choice. The next morning, Grace sat across from Dr. Adebayo again. "There are options," the doctor explained gently. "IVF, surrogacy, adoption." Grace listened carefully. Weeks ago, she would have clung desperately to any possibility, but now, her voice was steady. "What about adoption?" The doctor smiled softly. "There are many children who need homes." Grace nodded slowly. For months, she had mourned what she lost, but she realized something powerful. Motherhood was not limited to biology. Love could still grow, just differently, and differently didn't mean less. 5 years later, the prison gates opened again, but this time, they opened outward. Daniel stepped into sunlight, older, quieter, changed. 5 years had taken the sharpness from him. His hair was flecked with gray. His shoulders slightly heavier. His ego gone. His mother hugged him tightly. "Come home," she whispered. But Daniel shook his head softly. "I have somewhere else to go first." The Foundation Grace stood in front of a crowd once more. But this event was different. Children laughed in the background. Bright colors filled the space. A sign read, "The Special Foundation, Home for Children." Grace held the hand of a little girl with deep brown eyes and braided hair. "Everyone." Grace said warmly, "Meet Amara." The little girl smiled shyly. "She's my daughter." Applause filled the courtyard. Grace's smile was real, soft, unburdened. She had adopted Amara 2 years earlier, and in loving her, Grace had healed parts of herself she thought were permanently broken. She no longer stood in pain. She stood in purpose. The final meeting. Daniel watched from across the street. He had seen the news article about the Foundation's anniversary. He hadn't planned to come, but his feet brought him anyway. He saw her, Grace, stronger than ever, and the child beside her. His chest tightened, not with jealousy, not with regret alone, but with understanding. He waited until the event ended, until the crowd dispersed, until she stood alone near the gate. Then he stepped forward. Grace. She turned. For a moment, time folded, but it didn't hurt anymore. "Daniel," she said calmly. He nodded toward the building. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." His eyes moved toward the playground. "She's yours?" "Yes." A pause. "She's lucky." Grace studied him carefully. "You look peaceful," she observed. "I had 5 years to think." She nodded slightly. He swallowed. "I don't expect anything from you." "I know." Silence lingered between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was resolved. "I used to think power was control," Daniel said quietly. Grace listened. "But real power," he continued, "is restraint, accountability, choosing right when no one is watching." She gave a faint smile. "You finally understand." He looked down briefly. "I loved you badly," he admitted, "but I loved you." "I know," she replied softly. The wind moved gently between them. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. "Are you happy?" he asked carefully. Grace looked toward the playground where Amara laughed freely. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. He nodded. "That's all I needed to know." He turned to leave. then paused. Grace? Yes. I'm sorry for everything. She took a breath, and for the first time, she answered differently. I forgive you. Not for him, for herself. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, absorbing it. Then he walked away, not as a powerful man, not as a broken man, but as a man who finally understood the cost of his choices. The full circle that evening, Grace tucked Amara into bed. Mommy? The little girl whispered sleepily. Yes, my love? Was I special when you chose me? Grace's heart swelled, and she kissed her forehead gently. You were never just special, she whispered. She turned off the light and stepped onto the balcony one last time. The city lights shimmered. No storm, no thunder, just calm. Years ago, a man had said, "You're dramatic. It's just nothing special." But he had been wrong. Pain was not nothing. Love was not nothing. Loss was not nothing. And she had never been nothing. Grace smiled softly into the night. Because in the end, the woman he underestimated became the woman who rebuilt her world. And that was something very special. If you followed Grace's story from the beginning, ask yourself, what did you learn from this story? Was it about revenge, or was it about boundaries? Was it about betrayal, or about self-worth? Maybe it was this. Never beg for basic respect. Never shrink yourself to keep someone comfortable. And never let anyone convince you that your pain is nothing special. Because the moment someone dismisses your value, that's the moment you must remember it for yourself. If this story moved you, if it taught you something, if you felt Grace's pain, strength, and transformation, please like this story. Comment what lesson you learned. Share it with someone who needs encouragement. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of love, betrayal, growth, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive. And remember, you are never nothing special.